Good morning. Welcome to our daily devotion. It is Thursday, February 25th. Thank those of you that continue to watch these live, those of you that share them, those of you that are committed to them. I appreciate every single one of you. We're in Matthew chapter 10. Before I read these verses, you have to understand that this is where Jesus is talking to the disciples. Remember, when you study the scriptures, you have to make sure you know who his audience is, because he speaks differently to his disciples than he would to the crowds. So here he's speaking to the disciples. And when I first read this, I thought, well, I wonder, he's not saying this to the disciples. He must be saying this to the people that the disciples are going to meet. But we'll talk about this. Morning, Marcy. Morning, Paul. Jesus said, "Whoever acknowledges me before people, I will acknowledge them before my Father in heaven. But whoever disowns me before people, I will disown them before my Father in heaven." Now, what exactly is Jesus telling us here? Because you read this and you say to yourself, well, I would never do that. I've never done that. I've never disowned Jesus. But let's look at this, okay? Whoever acknowledges me, he says, I'll acknowledge before my Father in heaven. Acknowledging is simply believing who he is. Many people at that time refused to believe that Jesus was from God, even though they saw his miracles. But there were also many who believed that he was from God, even the Gentiles, the non-Jews. In fact, later on, we're going to see that he pours his Spirit out on the Gentiles, because the Jews closed their ears, not wanting to hear the truth. In John 14:11, it says this. He says, "Believe me when I say that I am the Father, and the Father is in me, or at least believe on the evidence of the miracles themselves." It's like, believe that I'm from God just from the miracles that I do, the incredible miracles that I do. Jesus promises us that he will acknowledge us. Those of us that believe, he will acknowledge us when we. Call from Smith. Sorry for the phone interruption. That he will acknowledge us before God, because we are willing to acknowledge him. I use these verses all the time, and you should have them underlined or accented in your Bible, because this is where you share the gospel. He says this. He said, right now the word is near you. It's in your mouth. It's in your heart. The word of faith that we are proclaiming. That is, if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For it is with your heart that you believe and are justified, and it is with your mouth that you confess and are saved. So what God is saying here is you have to believe in Jesus, but not just up here in your head. You have to believe it with your heart. You have to believe it with your heart. And then you have to be willing to confess it, to be willing to say, I want Jesus into my life. This is why when we do altar calls at our church at Collision, I first ask them to raise their hand, and then if they're serious about it, to actually stand, because that standing is like them verbally saying, I believe in Jesus. I want Jesus in my life. Too many people just believe that because you believe it in your head, it's enough. But it's not about believing in your head. It's believing it in your heart. It's understanding that Jesus is God, the creator of this world, and that he came into our world as a human and died a terrible death on a cross for our sins. That has to grab you in the heart. And then you have to be willing to say, I want that Jesus in my life. And then disowning Jesus is wanting nothing to do with Jesus. It's refusing to believe what he tells us. Look at what happened with Peter, the great Peter, in chapter 22. Now, this is way later now, after Jesus had said the scriptures that we looked at today. Peter replied, "Lord, I'm ready to go with you to prison and to death." And Jesus answered, I tell you, Peter, before the cock crows today, you will deny 3 times that you know me. He said, you will deny me 3 times. The great Peter denying Jesus. And we all know the story, that exactly what he did. Now, the good thing is that Jesus reinstates Peter. In John 21, verses 15 through 17, he says, when they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you truly love me more than these? More than these fish? More than the world? Jesus, yes, Lord. He said, you know that I love you. Jesus said, then feed my lambs. He asked Peter 3 different times because he disowned him 3 times. He literally reinstated Peter. Now, this is what I want to get into now. Have you ever disowned Jesus? Now, I know every one of you read it. Good morning, Mary. Good morning, Anna. Good morning, John. Good morning, Gloria. I know that every one of you watching this right now, so I would never do something like that. I would never disown Jesus. But listen to this now. Disowning Jesus can be refusing to talk about him. Now, it could be severe, refusing to listen to someone talking about him, actually making fun of someone talking about Jesus, ridiculing or rudely disagreeing with someone. Those are all forms of it. But there's more to it than that. In Matthew 10:27, he says this, but I tell you, what I tell you in the dark, speak in daylight. What is whispered in your ear, proclaim from the roofs. Do not be afraid of those who kill the body but cannot kill the soul. Rather be afraid of the one who can destroy both body and soul in hell. Don't be afraid of talking about Jesus. He says, in fact, he says, what I tell you in the dark, speak in the daytime. What I whisper in your ear, proclaim from the roofs. When you proclaim it from the roofs, it's like literally like stand on the roof of your house and proclaim it to your neighborhood that you love Jesus and that you follow him. And think about this now. Think about this. I know you would never deny Jesus, saying, "Oh, I don't believe in Jesus," but are you afraid or ashamed to talk about Jesus to others? Now, I'm not talking about just like your close friends that you get together with, but when you have opportunity to share the truth with a stranger or with someone that you don't know that well, are you afraid or ashamed to talk about Jesus? Think of this. When you get together, like I've done this many times in the park, and I got my grandkids there, and then I start up a conversation with someone. Before you know it, the cell phones come out, and you're showing pictures of my grandchildren in Austin, Texas, and I'm proud of my grandchildren that are there with me in the park. We're not afraid to talk about our children or our grandchildren. We take great pride. We talk about it. Whoever's willing to listen, we show our pictures to them. Whoever's willing to listen. Do we do that with our faith? Do we do that with Jesus? You can strike up a conversation with a complete stranger about Tiger Woods and the accident that he just had. You talk about that to a complete stranger. You talk about worldly things but how comfortable are you talking about your faith, talking about Jesus? Because that's a form of acknowledging or denying. Now, don't get me wrong. It's not that you denied him to the point where the Father's going to deny, where Jesus is going to deny you in front of God. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about the fact that we do deny Jesus sometimes by our unwillingness to talk about him. Him given an opportunity for us to share our faith with someone and not doing it. You've heard me say this saying all the time, how dare you not walk through a door that God opens for you? How many times has God opened the door for you to be able to share your faith with someone and you didn't do it because you were unwilling, because you were afraid, because you were ashamed, or because you thought that that person might not want to hear what you had to say? I tell you all the time, and I'll share it again. I got time to share it. I have literally shared the gospel in groups and with individuals, literally hundreds of thousands of times. And I cannot think of one single time where someone said, I don't want to hear that. Not one single time did I get that. And I've done it with some strange people, okay? I've done it with people that were literally demon possessed. Several times I've been with young people that I'm convinced I can remember sitting in a car years ago with this young person that had all kinds of problems, and I was giving him a ride home. And he was talking about, he would say, "Did you hear that?" And I said, "What?" He said, "You didn't hear that? The radio just told me that I'm supposed to do this, or I'm supposed..." He was constantly hearing voices. And I would share my faith with him. I'd share the truth with him. I did it with someone that used to come to when we had the bands that came in a hearse, that said he was a total atheist, did not believe in anything what I was saying, but yet was willing to listen. He would sit, when he came every week and listened to him, he would sit in church. He wouldn't sit there and go. He would literally listen. Don't be afraid to talk about Jesus. Don't be ashamed to talk about Jesus. It's a form of denying Jesus. If you are willing, God will open up. If you start praying, "God, give me opportunities to share my faith," God will open up doors all over the place for you. But you have to be willing to walk through them. And don't be surprised at who he brings into your life. People that you would never have thought of. Opportunities that you never thought of. But you have to be looking for them. Start looking for them. Ryan, great to have you joining us. Appreciate you watching these videos now. Ryan and went to my youth group years ago. Anna, thank you for your commitment. Mary, thank you for your commitment. Alicia, thank you for your commitment. Marcy, for yours. Hey, have a great day. Tonight is our Bible study. I hope many of you could join us. Otherwise, I'll see you tomorrow morning again for our next daily devotion. Share this if it meant something to you. God bless you all.